After a few years, I was working with some folks, under one company in the commercial fitness industry, and then eventually just spun off on my own, and really was able to drill down into companies, really able to help companies figure out, how to scale, how to put the systems and processes in place, how to have repeatable systems that allow them to get that income, that stability. That is something that's important to me.
Great tools, great direction, right? Like those two things in an organization, and that goes upon in my eyes. And again, I've dealt in operations and building organizations, but in my eyes, if you can really hit those two things on the head, whether you're running the sales division, whether you run an operation division, whether you're design division or support division, it's those two things, tools and clarity on what needs to be accomplished. I think that's important. And that's really what you were saying here, which I couldn't agree with you more.
Unfinished Business Podcast Show with your host, David Sliman.
Welcome back to Unfinished Business, everybody. Today's guest is a special one. This is Rick Meekins. He's a seasoned, and I'm talking seasoned, business strategist, entrepreneur, leadership advisor who really focuses on organizational achievement. Him and I were talking last week when we got connected. And listen, sales don't happen without operations, and operations don't happen without sales, and organizations just don't flow unless they have it together. So this is a big part of it. And a big part of our conversation together is really not only growing a company, but really making sure that it functions in a way that everybody knows, the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. So Rick is a managing partner at Epiphany Consulting, and he works with leaders and teams to refine processes, improve communication, alignment operations and strategies, really turning visions into measurable results. So he also hosts his own podcast, Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast, which I'm lucky enough to be a guest on shortly. So we're going to do that on the rebound here in a while. But more importantly, I'm really excited to have our guest hear his story behind leadership, behind growth, organizational transformation, all that good stuff. And Rick, I want to thank you for being on the show. So Rick Meekins, welcome.
Hey, David, thank you so much. You have me stuck on like seasoned, and like more and more folks are saying seasoned, and I'm sitting here going, man, I'm just old at this point. At least you didn't say, oh, he's been doing it for 30 plus years, because then
You and I both, man, right? I think it was you and I talking about this. I was like, damn. I'm stuck on 25 for me, but I think it's actually 27 or 28 years in doing this. But I'm holding on to that 25 for some reason. But right, seasoned for us is the way. We'll call experienced, right? Seasoned or experienced, man. I love it.
Hang out for a couple of decades,
You caught that. Listen, man, you've had a journey in this world, and I want to kind of go back a little bit. But what inspired you? What was that pivotal moment that inspired you, or was that a combination of things that really inspired you to move into this, sustainable growth, operations growth, improving communications, all the nuts and bolts that make an organization grow? Tell me that story, and our listeners that story.
Yeah, man, sure. One of the things that's always bugged me, how you have that itch, just like, I hate this thing. I want to solve this problem. One of the things that always bugged me was honestly, it was like homelessness. It was people that couldn't take care of themselves. And I know that's going like way, way back, but this is something even from a child. I always wanted to be in business. When I was in school, they had, what are the three things you want to be when you grow up? Engineer, business, and I don't know what, so it was always those two things. And the cool thing that happened to me is I used to have a restaurant in Allentown, Pennsylvania. It was called our Petros Cafe and Coffee Bar. And, we had a big open like dining room. And so what would happen is like I hung out with the Chamber of Commerce. And so a lot of those folks would come through the restaurant and they had good businesses, but their challenge was they didn't know how to scale them. Now I'm running an operation. I've got like 26 people. I've got, on-site catering, off-site catering, banquet facilities, serving lunch and dinner, upscale. And, they're like, well, I don't know how to hire my first person, my second person, my third person. I'm micromanaging my team because I'm afraid that they won't do it right. And I'm like, this is systems. This makes sense. Let's figure out how we can help these people. And so after I left the restaurant business because,
Uh-huh.
I don't know, it was killing me or something like that. Um,
I get it. Yeah.
after a few years, I was working with some folks, under one company in the commercial fitness industry, and then eventually just spun off on my own, and really was able to drill down into companies, really able to help companies figure out how to scale, how to put the systems and processes in place, how
Yeah.
to have repeatable systems that allow them to get that income, that stability. That is something that's important to me.
Yeah, that's great, man. So you went from the restaurant world, which believe me, I know that space as well. I've been in the marketing and advertising space, and I worked with the SMB space, so I know that world. It's a lot of work. And then you went to the fitness industry, which I was in the fitness industry too for a short while myself, for actually about 3 years. And
Uh-huh.
then you started working with organizations on scaling and operational alignment, and it spawned from there. So that's what a transition, man. It happens quick, doesn't it?
I know. I was sitting here, it's like, I've already had 5 careers, and I'm only years old, That used
Hey.
to be impressive,
Listen, you work with a lot of leaders and organizations. I want to hit this on the head because it sparked a question for me. What are the most common challenges you see when it comes to scaling or an aligning a vision of an organization, and really more so executing on that?
That's I feel like that's two different questions. So,
Yeah, it
scaling an
probably is.
organization.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the biggest issue with scaling an organization is a lot of times, especially with younger companies, smaller
Hmm.
companies, is they haven't thought out what those processes are. So if
Hmm.
you look at it from the perspective of, hey, I have a sales process, what do you do? It's like, well, I talk to the person, I this, and so how do you train someone else? It's like, well, you don't get that consistency, and the biggest thing about not having that consistency is that if you have to train someone else, if you have to bring someone else in, if that
Hmm.
person leaves the company, you don't have a standard. The other piece to that is it's harder to improve something that you're not tracking, that you're not following.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Would you say and that's one of the biggest things I've noticed in the consulting work I have. Do you think that's the biggest blind spot that organizations have? Like they'll have this person, right, where they started with them 14 years ago. They were doing one job at that time, but then they got promoted or they evolved with another job. And then all of a sudden they've done these things, they've never documented it. And they have all these things that they're doing. And then they decide to leave or something happens where there's a transition of some sort. And all of a sudden they're sitting there and they're like, okay, well, how do we train this next person that go on? Is that one of the bigger blind spots that you've seen?
Oh gosh, yeah. Oh gosh, there will be one person that's still as you said, still doing 4 or 5 different jobs around the company, and they're going to leave, and you've got this vacuum. And the problem with it, the other problem with that is there's no such thing. Really, there's no such thing as multitasking. And so that person, while they've got their hands in a lot of buckets, they're not as efficient as they would be if multiple people were doing those jobs.
Yeah.
And then as you said, they've kind of put these systems together, sometimes like duct taping these systems together. So when they
Yeah.
leave, it's just like, oh my gosh, we've got this huge vacuum. We've got this productivity vacuum. We've got an information vacuum. There's a level of confidence because they may have had relationships with customers, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's a big deal. An organization, a true organization has to be, kind of plug and play. And I'm not going to
Yeah.
say that people aren't important, but we have to have the roles in the system. They have to be set up so that when someone leaves, someone else can come in and we can get them up to speed relatively quickly. If you
Yeah.
think about the idea that a lot of times it takes like 6 months to get somebody really clicking, or if you've got someone in a
Yeah.
management or leadership position, it can take a year to 2 years to get them really clicking. You want to be ahead of the game on that. A lot of
Yeah.
times, there was a company I was working with years ago. He couldn't keep people on because he didn't have processes in place. People would come in and he's just like, "Well, you know how to do project management. You go and do your job. Go do the thing." And they weren't able to deliver at that
Yeah.
level that he wanted, and they kept leaving. He's like, "Rick, people keep leaving. And so it didn't work for him.
What are some of the exercises that you do with organizations to eliminate this? Because this is a big conversation, especially and we've, with our consulting company, we've seen organizations that are, they need to transform and bring new people in, and not so much to just, again, eliminate people, but sometimes to add people. How do you prepare organizations? And again, break this down as simple, because I know there's business owners listening to this out there going, oh my gosh, that's my organization right now. We're growing so quickly, or we've had people in place for years. I really don't know. If I were to bring somebody on today, I wouldn't know how to train them. How do you help an organization, or what would you recommend that they start doing now if they haven't done a lot of this documenting and things like that for a position, I should
It's
say?
really, I don't want to say it's as simple as, but it is, basically as simple as getting out a whiteboard and then starting
Hmm.
to walk through the processes. And the cool thing about it, and I've done this, across roles, is we get the whiteboard and we start talking through. And as we're
Yeah.
talking through, we start to have realizations. Hey, you know what? We're dropping the ball here. Hey, this is taking too long. Hey, you know what? Somebody else can pick up this other piece of this so that we can be more efficient.
Yeah.
Having it out on paper, it's really a revealing process, or having it on a whiteboard, I should say, is
Yeah.
really revealing process. And then going
Great
back and
start.
actually documenting what each step means, what the requirement for each step. I mean, it just makes it a lot easier. And the exercise, it's almost like a business plan. It's like the exercise of doing it makes you think through the processes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that you
Yeah.
can, you're in a better position to make decisions. But then when someone comes in, you have a document. When you're doing your reviews, you have a document to go back to. When you're finding problems, inefficiencies, you have a document to go back to. Are we following this? Are we using this? Okay, we're not using this. Let's work towards this. Or why aren't we using this? Oh, there's a different way, a better way. Let's change the
Good.
document. But if we have nothing to base it from, it's just like, well,
Yeah.
he trained me this way and she trained me that way, and you know that
Right.
doesn't work.
Speaking two different languages. All right, I'm going to ask you this question really quick. How important is the organizational chart?
The org chart is important. The org chart is important. People need to understand. I think one of the really, really basic things is people need to know who to go to if they have a challenge. Okay,
Hmm.
so if I'm a designer, I need to know who my manager is, who is going to bring me together. The other thing is, as a manager needs to be able to bring his team together and help each of them understand where they fit into the picture. So if we're doing a newsletter, for example,
Yeah.
we've got design, we've got copywriting, we've got conversion to HTML, et cetera, et cetera. So we have all these things, and if everybody knows what everybody else is doing, it makes it a lot easier, a lot more efficient to get it out quickly.
Yes. And then let's talk about this. Helping leaders, like you're talking about management leaders. And again, I always say leaders aren't people who are in front of the room. I mean, leaders are people who are running their departments or trying to make the organization better. But what's your approach in helping leaders? Because it leads to this, right? Clarity and then accountability across their teams, right?
My biggest, and I know that people have different perspectives on this. My biggest, um, the way that I think about leadership is
Yeah.
kind of like a sports team. Okay, so that
Hmm.
sports team, the leaders, like part of that team, they have a role. They have the role for vision to make sure that everybody's moving in the same direction. But at the same time, that leader's responsible for making sure that everybody has what they need in order to move in that direction. And then the leader is also responsible for making sure that communication is happening. So if communication isn't happening, if people don't have their resources, if we don't know where we're going, we don't have an organization. We have a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. Great tools, great direction, right? Like if that
Mhm.
those two things in an organization, and that goes upon in my eyes, and again, I've dealt in operations and building organizations, but in my eyes, if you can really hit those two things on the head, whether you're running the sales division, whether you run an operation division, whether you're design division or support division, it's those two things, tools and clarity on what needs to be accomplished. I think that's important, and that's really what you were saying here, which I couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more. All right, let's talk about business growth a little bit. Let's talk about combining that with operations. All right, when we used that word earlier, and I asked it in a question, I sliced it into two questions. But when companies are trying to scale, because I want to stay focused on this, where do you usually see them get stuck, and where have you had an experience, or maybe you can share it on how you've helped a company move past that point? I'd love to hear your perspective on this, because scaling is such a big one.
The first part of scaling is really understanding where the team is.
Okay.
So there's different roles. So you've got your leader, obviously. A lot of times leaders say, "Hey, I want to scale my organization." Okay, but that leader has to be engaged. That leader has to be part of the process, not just at the beginning and just dropping off. Say, "Okay, guys, I want to do this CRM system because I think it's going to make us more efficient," and then just go away.
Right, drop it
Because
in.
you have the same vacuum problem, because you've got this leader and you have your champion that's going to say, "Hey, I'm going to go with you and make sure we get this thing done." But if that champion goes away and that leader hasn't been engaged, then the project falls apart. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
The second stage to that is the team has to be ready. So we have to say, "Okay, team, we're going to engage in change in our organization. Where are we?" Now, this is typically that change management conversation, but we can actually start having that conversation before we incorporate strategy, because the team's readiness is going to impact how quickly we can incorporate change. If the team is going to be slower, we've got a team that's been working together for 10 to 15 years doing the exact same thing, and they're our age.
Stuck in their way.
They're not going to
seasoned, man. Seasoned.
They're not going to. They may not pick up things as quickly as perhaps younger people. So we have to really understand the culture that we're working with before we get into the strategy, because it's like, if you think about it from a sports perspective, right? We're not going to give the Patriots, I'll use football, the Patriots strategy, to the Falcons, because it's not going to work for them, because the Falcons is a different team.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say, and I'm a Browns fan, so there's no strategy that will ever work for that team, believe me.
I was thinking that for Atlanta, but
you were going to say Browns. You're giving the great thing, but I think the bigger thing is what you're saying here, and I'm a big believer in this. You have to understand your team, because then you play to their strengths, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's a big part of it, is identifying your team. I think there's some foundational things that you can have within your organization that will work, but we're dealing with we're all human beings, man. And we're all wired a little bit differently. And sometimes you have to evaluate that and play to some of these strengths. It brings up a great story for me most recently. I've been doing consulting work for an organization now for about a year and a half, 2 years. And there were some sales professionals that we really identified that were good, but they just weren't hitting their numbers. And what I pulled up after working for a little while with them was their retention was okay, but I felt like there was a huge opportunity for them to expand on their current customer base, or bring back customers maybe that worked with them a while ago and they lost touch with. Well, we transitioned a couple representatives into this department, and they have skyrocketed in this department. But they like to do a lot of research. They like to be more of an account manager versus doing the prospecting and cold calling. And they like to come from more of a research standpoint. And it played to their strengths. And we've identified too with this organization, the type of person they need in that position and the strengths they need. So it really does come back to what we were talking about, is evaluate your teams and try to adjust and play to their strengths. And it's been a really good story. I saw a great post you had, man, when you talked about most growth plans, right? And growing organizations, they fail because they never pressure test. They never pressure test what they're doing. And I'd like you to talk to, for those people who are listening and haven't seen that post, tell me more about that and expand on it, because I thought it was great. I thought it was great insight.
Pressure testing has to do with testing your system. It's like, hey, I want to incorporate a new business development program, or I want to create a new sales, marketing, customer experience program for my company. Okay, we have to, and on paper, it'll look beautiful. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? You've got like all these customer touch points, and it's just like you've got like
Uh-huh.
lead scoring up there and this and that. And it's like you've got like communications and everything working. But we've got to be able to break this down. Okay. And we've got to be able to what I like to do, what I always tell companies to do is, let's do this. Let's start out by having a minimum viable product, if you will, your MVP. And we're going to push that out. Okay. And what
Yeah.
that does is that helps us to avoid over investing. Okay. And that allows us to go to market much faster. This is one of the, if you talk to the innovation community, this is one of the keys that we have to be able to overcome. We have to be able to push stuff out quickly, test it quickly, see if it's going to work, see if we have market fit, see if we have capability and capacity to make it work consistently. And then once we find out that it works, then we add another layer of complexity to it. Hey, you know what? Let's add this other piece to this. Okay, it's working well. Okay, let's start to scale it. Let's see if we can, get into a growth phase with this particular, whatever that's going to be. And then if it's working, then shoot for the moon at that point. But going in all the way. First of all, it takes you forever. There's always going to be that little thing. It's just like, oh, we could do this better. It's going to be a waste of time. It's going to be a waste of time. One of the rules that we've had in the military, when I was in the military, you have 80% of the information go.
Yes.
We can't, that other 20% typically is not worth waiting for.
It's great, man. There's never going to be the perfect time, right? And I think that's what you're saying. It just, nothing's going to be, the stars aren't going to align. Everything's not going to be perfect. You've just got to pressure test. And I love that, because I'm a big believer too. In some circumstances, you want to fail fast, right? Like if it's not going to work, you want this thing to bust, and you want it to bust quick. And if it does bust and you identify things that you can't live with, well, then either you got to scrap it or try a new strategy. And I think that's
absolutely
what's important. And staying on business growth and operations, I know we're talking about this type of topic, but where can a company, like, where do most companies, I know we talked about this on the first question. I actually should say this. What kind of quick fix could they make now that you see that's most common, so they could get a win quickly? And I'm talking about from operational and a business growth standpoint. But if there's one area where most companies could see like a quick gain, kind of like a low-hanging fruit thing, what would that be on the operation side?
I'm going to speak from the perspective of a systems thinker. Okay. So I always think big picture. Okay. And so a company that's operating and doing a very good job has people in place that are doing a very, very good job at doing the thing that they do. Okay. A lot of times companies aren't naturally designed or naturally thinking about growth. They're not looking at how all the parts and pieces fit together. You improve your sales program. What does that mean? What does that mean for your production? What does that mean for the rest of your organization? And so my opinion has been that it is very good. It's crucial, I think, to have an outside perspective or a growth leader come into the organization. When I say growth leader, I'm not talking about like a revenue person, but I'm saying that someone that's strictly focused on the organizational growth and being able to say, okay, let's go. Okay, this is working. This is not working. Let's adjust, because that person is like your navigator. It's like your dashboard. They're able to see the field where you're typically doing the job. You as the CEO, you're doing the job that you do. You know what I'm saying? You don't necessarily have that time to really drill down on the details that growth leader can drill down on.
Yeah, that's one of the, I love consulting. For years, I've done 4 startups through the years. And in the first 3, I was very much in the weeds. And and you can't see things. And the times I grew the most as an organization is when I
Mhm.
had somebody from the outside come in and take a look at it and go, oh, you should do this. This is going well. This needs to be fixed. Like when you're in the weeds every day, it's really tough to see that. It's really tough to see that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely,
Um,
and I would say it for my own companies. When I've had other
yeah,
people,
yeah,
I've had like 4 companies over the past 10 years or so, and like
yeah,
when other people were able to come in and bring their genius to it, things went
yeah.
much faster. If it's all coming out of this head,
Right. Totally.
I can get in my own weeds.
So true, man. So true. Um, let's switch a little bit here and talk about culture and team building. It's a huge part of operations and organizations as a whole. But how do you coach leaders to build stronger, more cohesive teams? Because that's a big part of it. Is you have these silos that are working together, right? Or working in for themselves, and then you're trying to integrate them. But how do you coach leaders? If there's any advice you give to a leader, how would you help them build a stronger, more cohesive team?
When our company was growing, our company grew really fast. We went from I think like 5 people to like 30 people
Damn, that's
inside of
fast.
probably inside of a year, 2 years maybe. I don't remember
Yeah.
exactly the time frame. And one thing that one day one of my managers comes to me and says, "Hey, I told this person that she needed to XYZ." And this person came back and said to me, "It's like, oh well, we ABC." Right. And so I had a conversation with the manager and I had a conversation with the person. And I realized that they were communicating in 2 different styles. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Where the manager was just thinking strategic. It's like, okay, we need to do this because of this, that, and the other. The person that was doing the work was saying, okay, I just want to let you know how we do things right now, just in case that informs your decision. It wasn't to be argumentative.
Yeah.
It was just her style of thinking. And the cool thing about it is she's always extraordinarily like on point with everything that she does. It's just
Yeah.
her nature. And so
Yeah.
what we had to do is we actually had to do personality tests, right? And it wasn't just for the sake of doing it, but it was for the sake of understanding how each of us communicates and
Yeah.
what all of our drivers are and that sort of thing. And that one thing made a huge change in our organization, just in the way we communicate and the way that we began to understand each other across departments. You know
I
what I'm
love
saying?
that.
It, and
Yeah.
and the other piece to the other thing that we did is I had a virtual we had a virtual team. We've had that team was all virtual. We had people all around the world.
Uh-huh.
Um, and the other thing that we needed to do is we needed to personalize the company. So instead of, hey, we're all just doing work, we had like game nights, and everybody would
Yeah.
get together and we would play like online games. And we were playing online games before it was cool, you know. But it was important because people got to know each other. And, like a lot of these I shouldn't say I haven't spoken with, but I know that I can pick up the phone and probably call 70% of the people that were working with me at that time. They'll be happy to hear from me. We can have a conversation. If I need something from them, they're going to go,
Yeah.
yeah, Rick, we can, I can jump in. I can do this thing.
Yeah. That's when you know you've developed a really good culture, right? When you can go back and that's one of the things I cherish about some of the experiences I've had through the years. And even recently I've talked to actually probably 2 or 3 people in the last organization I built, probably over the last couple of months. And it wasn't planned that way. It just happened. And um, that's when you've identified that you've built a good culture, when you can connect with those people in the future and reach out at any time. If they need something, they can reach out to you or vice versa. I really think that's
Yeah.
important. Really
Oh yeah.
important.
We're people first. One of my
Yeah.
friends, he made the perfect analogy. He said to me that organizations are kind of like communities, and if the people in the community work together, then if the people in the organization, the community can work together, then the community will thrive. But
Yeah.
if people don't trust, if trust is low, if communication is low, et cetera, then the community tends to struggle. And it's the same with organizations. So if we look at it that way and we value the members of our community, the members of our team will be more successful.
Yeah. Have you ever been in a situation where you've had to rebuild a culture, or maybe it got fragmented? A company's been around for a while. There's been some transition, or maybe there's been people there who have been there too long, or this one. Well, this is how we've always done it, kind of thing. But have you ever been in a situation where you've had an organization that might have become fragmented or disconnected, and you've got to piece that back together by making adjustments?
You know what? The best example I have is actually a company that grew really fast, and I'm not talking about
Hmm.
my company this time.
Yeah.
So we had a company that had about 6 people,
Uh-huh.
close knit. They all worked essentially in the same room. They saw each other
Yeah.
every day. They're friends. They go out for beers and that sort of thing on the weekend, right?
Yeah.
But the owner wanted to scale the company. Okay. And we ended up scaling the company. In this case, we went from 6 people to about 30 people. And inside of 3 years, we went from revenue of about 6 million up to 24 million. Okay.
Oof.
And
Yeah.
so we had
Good
a
growth.
whole new, it wasn't just people, it was new departments and it was new
Vision.
types of thinking that were involved in the organization. And so we had to be very, very intentional about creating a culture for this company because the culture is typically an extension of the owner,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
um,
So true, man.
the owner didn't think in terms of culture. That just wasn't his, that's just not the way that he thought. And so we literally created an internal marketing program for the team to get them motivated to build this culture for them. And then we're doing the barbecues and we're doing all of the things, at a larger scale, and we're bringing the community in and we're doing not-for-profit events together as a team, and it was great. It was
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic. It was absolutely phenomenal.
So, on that, it brings a question to my head, right? Because what advice would you give a business owner that kind of feels there's this a sticking point, right? Like you're stuck between this maintaining the stability of the company, but yet you want to pursue the growth, right? So, what advice would you give an owner who's kind of stuck between that, want to grow, but yet they want to hold that family feel stability, and it's a tough balance. I mean, what kind of advice would you give someone out there listening who's kind of in that role, in that position?
That's really a so you have a leader with a heart that
Mm,
cares about the people that he's working with and wants to continue that. I mean, the most important thing is to be intentional. One of the things that we as leaders have to contend with, two things we have to contend with is one, not everybody that starts with us is going to finish with us.
hmm.
Okay. And that's just sometimes the nature of growth. And that has to be okay. And we have to be thinking in terms of, okay, if John isn't going to be if we can't see John in the future of this organization, how do we make his transition as good as possible? You
Yeah,
know what I'm saying? How do
yeah,
we, help him maybe to another organization or, whatever that's going to look like? We have to learn to be okay with that because that is part of leadership because we have 30 other people that would like to grow. They would like to be able to take more home. They would like to be able to send their kids to school. They'd like to be able to take the nice vacations and that sort of thing. As leaders, that's what people look for us to do, to lead the way. You know what I'm saying? They're
yeah,
not
yeah,
necessarily looking for someone just to mark time because the other thing that happens when we just mark time is somebody else moves faster. And you know what happens
yeah.
sometimes? That person that we thought was loyal to us, that was just like, oh man, he's going to be here till I die. She sees that greener field, and she's like,
Yeah,
Rick, I love you. It has been great, but they offered me twice as much money. I've got to,
yeah,
and they're going to say, I'm not greedy, but I have to take care of my family.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know
It's
what I
tough.
mean? So
Yeah,
as leaders, we have to think big picture. We have to understand not just what's best for the moment, but we have to understand what's best for the whole organization. That was a tough lesson for me,
yeah,
at some points because I wanted to keep everyone together. I wanted to keep everything working. And we just didn't have the work. You know what I'm saying? I
hmm,
wanted to
yeah,
have the work. I wanted to believe, hey, we can forge ahead. But you know what? The reality is it doesn't always work like that.
yeah. It
And
doesn't,
it's really
man.
unfortunate.
Yeah, and I think as entrepreneurs, listen, we're wired as humans, and this is I'm going to ask you a couple more questions here. But first off, Rick, this has been I've loved this interview. This has been great. You bring such a perspective, and there's one thing that keeps coming out here: the people first, and really identifying your teams, what their strengths are, and then building, having a process in place, but also being able to make adjustments based on the team that you have within the organization. And that keeps coming up in our responses as well. But when as humans, change is tough for a lot of us. Okay. And when you're a leader in an organization, how do you help stay focused, okay, and grounded in helping others when there's this change and a little bit of chaos? I say controlled chaos within an organization, especially in the ones that are growing quickly, like the examples you've given, going from, in, like I said, even the organizations I worked with, we've gone from, 1 million to 10 million. I mean, 10 million to 20 million. And that's not just a revenue thing. That's an operational thing. That's a people thing. But in those situations, I want to frame this question right. Personally, staying focused and grounded when you're helping others navigate through chaos and change, how do you recommend, or how have you personally done that? And I think I'd love to hear your answer.
I think for me, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, it really starts with being really focused on your mission and your vision.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
Because stuff, and I'm going to use the hard language here. Stuff sucks sometimes, as an entrepreneur. Things,
Yeah.
we're supposed to be going straight and stuff goes left,
Yeah.
and what do you do when stuff goes left? You have to continue focusing on the mission and vision. You have to
Yeah,
remember,
it's
and when
great.
something goes left, you have to say, what's going to be the best for everyone that's involved in that situation. This is really important. This is where, this is why there's so many conversations now about like the emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
because believe me, it is very easy to come into this place and just be like, oh my gosh, I can't handle it, I quit, I give up. But that's not what that's not how we're wired as entrepreneurs. And we have to be able to say, you know what, that's okay. That's okay. The other thing that we have to do is we have to understand how change happens. Okay. Just because we introduce a new software, okay, introducing a new software happens like this. Hey, we're switching from Microsoft to Google, happens like this. Adoption doesn't happen that quickly. You know what I'm saying? It's just
Yeah.
like, hey, I was doing this on Outlook, da 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 da, and I can't do that anymore. You know what I'm saying? And
Yes.
over time, people will adapt, and we have to, as leaders, we have to remember that. And instead of coming down with the hammer, we have to support. It's like, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. What problems, what challenges, what do you think that we can do to make this easier for you? That communication piece, that making people feel like they're humans, not switches, and having the appropriate response to how quickly they adapt to change. You support people.
It's great. What a great way. Listen, play that, just like that last 2 minutes on that answer, play that back and listen to the question, and then listen to his answer again, because it comes down to going back to the fundamentals of your mission and what the direction is and what the belief is in your organization. And the vision of your organization. That was fantastic answer. One of the better I've heard in a conversation like this. So I commend you, man. Again, the perspective on this has been fantastic. So listen, if someone wants to reach out to you, Rick, get a little bit more information, just talk with you, where can they find you?
Easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn. Rick,
Yeah.
if you just type in Rick Meekins,
Yeah.
RickMeekins, I'll pop up there. If you type my name in Google, you'll be able to find me in a
Yeah.
dozen places.
Great, man. Great. And I want to plug the show again. Your podcast is a relentless pursuit of winning, right? I see you
Yes,
got the
sir.
hat on right
Yes,
there.
sir.
So check him out on that podcast. I'm excited. Like I said, in a little while. I mean, it's going to be a little bit off, but we're definitely. I'm going to get on the show and I'm going to talk with you there on the sales side of things. But I got to tell you, it's been great having you as a guest on the show. And I know that our listeners are going to get a lot out of this today. So, Rick, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
Sure, man. I loved it. I love the question, and I hope I created value.
You did, man. You did. So everybody out there, listen, share this show, like this show, push it out to somebody who can benefit from it. There's a lot of great stuff, a lot of great nuggets and answers in this show. And more importantly, to all of you, wealth, health, success. As I always say, go get a win. I don't care how big, how small it is. Go get a win today. And everybody, we'll see you next time. Rick, thanks again for being here.
You bet. You bet. Thank you.
Unfinished Business Podcast Show with your host, David Sliman.